Lieutenant Kim Tae-ho rubbed his tired eyes as he walked down the corridor of the research ship Pioneer. 3 weeks into deep space, and he was stuck babysitting their first alien prisoner. Not exactly what he signed up for when he joined the Earth Defense Force. The alien sat in the corner of her containment cell, knees pulled up to her chest. Her fox-like ears twitched whenever he approached, but she never looked at him directly. The scientists called her species something complicated, but Tae-ho just knew her as Nari. She had been captured during a skirmish near the outer colonies, though nobody seemed to know why she was out there alone. "Come on, you need to eat something," Tae-ho said, sliding a tray of standard rations through the food slot. It was the same thing he said every day for the past 4 days. And just like every other day, Nari pushed the tray away without even looking at it. Her ribs were starting to show through her thin, pale skin. The medical team said she was slowly starving herself, but they couldn't force-feed an alien without risking an interstellar incident. So Tae-ho kept trying the gentle approach, even though it wasn't working. "Look, I know this stuff doesn't taste great," he continued, settling down cross-legged outside her cell. "But it's got all the nutrients humans need. Maybe it'll work for you too." He opened his own ration pack and took a bite, making exaggerated eating motions. "See? Safe." Nari's large golden eyes finally met his. There was intelligence there, and something else. Fear? Shame? Tae-ho couldn't tell. Her people looked almost human except for those fox ears and a tail that she kept wrapped around herself like a security blanket. On the 5th day, something changed. When Tae-ho brought her morning meal, Nari actually reached for the tray. She sniffed the food carefully, then took a tiny bite. Her face scrunched up at the taste, but she kept eating. Tae-ho felt a small victory. Maybe she was finally trusting him. "That's good," he said encouragingly. "Take your time." For the next few hours, Tae-ho felt proud of his progress. He had managed to get through to their alien guest when the scientists couldn't. But his good mood didn't last long. During his evening security check, something in Nari's cell caught his eye. The waste disposal unit was supposed to be empty, but there were objects scattered around it. Colorful, glittering objects that definitely weren't supposed to be there. Tae-ho's first thought was that Nari had somehow smuggled in contraband, maybe hidden gems or some kind of alien technology. He activated his security scanner and pointed it at the mysterious objects. The readout made him blink hard and scan again. Emeralds, diamonds, rubies, all genuine according to his equipment. But how had they gotten into a secured containment cell? He looked at Nari, who had noticed his discovery. Her ears were flat against her head, and she had curled up into an even tighter ball than usual. She looked absolutely mortified, like a child caught doing something terrible. That's when the impossible truth hit him. These gems hadn't been smuggled in, they had come out of Nari. Somehow this alien girl was producing precious stones as waste products. Tae-ho stared at the glittering pile, then at Nari's embarrassed face, then back at the gems. In all his years of military service, he had never encountered anything like this. He was pretty sure nobody had. "Well," he said quietly, "that's definitely not in the training manual." Dr. Park So-young arrived at the containment level within an hour of Tae-ho's discovery. She was the Pioneer's lead xenobiologist, a woman who had spent her entire career dreaming of moments like this. But even she seemed stunned as she stared at the collection of gems scattered around Nari's cell. "You're absolutely certain these came from her?" So-young asked, adjusting her glasses for the 3rd time. Tae-ho nodded. "I've been monitoring this cell for days. Nothing goes in or out without my knowledge. These definitely weren't here before she ate." Nari had retreated to the farthest corner of her cell, making herself as small as possible. Her fox ears were pressed flat against her head, and she refused to make eye contact with either human. Every few seconds she would glance at the gems, then quickly look away as if they were something disgusting. "Fascinating," So-young murmured, pulling out her portable scanner. "The molecular structure is identical to naturally formed gems, but there are trace elements I've never seen before." She looked up at Nari with scientific curiosity. "I need to understand how this is possible." Getting Nari to cooperate took patience. She seemed deeply ashamed of what the humans had discovered, covering her face with her hands whenever they mentioned the gems. It took Tae-ho sitting beside her cell and speaking gently for 20 minutes before she would even look at them. "It's nothing to be embarrassed about," he said softly. "We just want to understand." Through a combination of simple words, hand gestures and crude drawings, Nari began to explain. Her people, the Lumari, came from a world rich in minerals and crystals. Over millions of years, their bodies had adapted to process these minerals in a unique way. So Young's eyes lit up as she began to understand. Your digestive system doesn't just break down food for energy. It separates out mineral compounds and crystallizes them into these gems. Nari nodded miserably, as if admitting to some terrible crime. "But this is incredible," So Young continued, her excitement growing. "Your people are living, breathing geological processes. You can turn raw minerals into perfect gemstones just by eating." The more So Young learned, the more amazed she became. The Lumari's specialized organs could identify different mineral types and sort them accordingly. Iron became garnets, silicon formed into various quartzes, carbon crystallized into diamonds. It was like having a master jeweler's workshop built right into their biology. "Do all of your people do this?" Tae-ho asked. Nari's expression grew even sadder. She began drawing pictures in the dust on her cell floor. Simple figures that looked like her people, but confined in small spaces. Guards watching them. The drawings told a story that made both humans uncomfortable. They're being kept somewhere. So Young realized, forced to produce these gems. Nari nodded vigorously, then pointed to herself and made a running motion. She had escaped from wherever her people were being held. Tae-ho felt anger building in his chest. "Someone is using your people like living machines." The pieces were starting to come together. Nari wasn't just a random alien they had captured. She was a refugee running from captivity. And if her drawings were accurate, there were many more Lumari trapped somewhere, being forced to produce gems for their captors. "We need to contact command immediately," So Young said, her scientific excitement now mixed with concern. But Nari grabbed Tae-ho's sleeve through the cell barrier, shaking her head frantically. She drew more pictures showing ships and weapons, making it clear that her captors were dangerous and would come looking for her. "Don't worry," Tae-ho said, placing his hand against the barrier where hers rested on the other side. "We won't let anyone hurt you. What you can do isn't shameful, it's a gift." For the first time since her capture, Nari almost smiled. Technician Lee Da-yoon had always been good with scared animals. Growing up on a farm outside Seoul, she had coaxed countless frightened creatures out of hiding spots. Now, 3 days after Dr. Park's examination, she found herself using those same gentle skills on their alien guest. "I brought you something different today," Da-yoon said, sitting cross-legged outside Nari's cell with a small container. "Fruit from Earth. Sweet, not like those terrible rations." Nari's nose twitched at the smell of sliced apples. She had been eating the standard food, but Da-yoon could tell she didn't enjoy it. The Lumari girl crept closer to the barrier, her golden eyes focused on the fruit. "It's okay," Da-yoon said, sliding a piece through the food slot. "No pressure. Just try it, if you want." The apple slice disappeared quickly, then another. For the first time since her capture, Nari actually looked pleased about eating something. Da-yoon smiled and offered more. Over the next hour, something magical happened. Nari began to relax. She moved closer to where Da-yoon sat, no longer huddled in the corner like a trapped animal. When Da-yoon started humming an old Korean lullaby, Nari's ears perked up with curiosity. "You like music?" Da-yoon asked. She pulled out her tablet and played a gentle instrumental piece. Nari's eyes widened, and she pressed her face against the barrier to get closer to the sound. It was then that Nari began to speak. Not in her own language, but in broken English mixed with gestures and drawings. The story she told made Da-yoon's blood run cold. Nari drew pictures of her home world, a beautiful place covered in crystal formations and mineral deposits. Her people lived peacefully there for generations, their unique ability to process gems, seen as a natural part of life, like humans growing hair or shedding skin. Then the Corvani came. Da-yoon had heard of them, a powerful empire that controlled several star systems, but she had never heard of this. "They took us," Nari said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Said we were valuable. Put us in boxes. The drawings became darker. Nari sketched rows of small rooms, each containing a Lumari figure, guards with weapons, schedules and quotas. Her people were being treated like livestock, fed specific diets to maximize gem production. "How many of your people?" Da'un asked. Gently, Nari held up her fingers, counting. When she ran out of fingers, she started over. Then again and again. Thousands, Da'un realized with growing horror. Maybe tens of thousands. The worst part was how the Corvani had convinced the galaxy that these gems were naturally mined. They had entire fake mining operations, complete with asteroid bases and fabricated geological surveys. No one knew that behind all those beautiful jewels were enslaved people, forced to produce them with their own bodies. "I was being moved," Nari continued, drawing a ship. "Transport accident, guards hurt, I ran." She had been fleeing through space for weeks before human patrol ships found her. The Corvani were probably still looking for her, not because she was particularly important, but because escaped slaves could expose their entire operation. Da'un felt sick. She had admired Corvani jewelry before, had even saved up to buy a small pendant with Corvani gems. Now she understood what she had really been purchasing. "We have to tell the others," Da'un said, standing up quickly. But Nari grabbed her hand through the barrier, shaking her head frantically. She drew pictures of Corvani warships, of weapons of destruction. Her message was clear. If the humans tried to help, the Corvani would come for them too. "You're afraid they'll hurt us," Da'un realized. Nari nodded, tears forming in her golden eyes. Even after everything she had suffered, she was trying to protect the humans who had shown her kindness. But Da'un was already thinking like a technician, solving problems step by step. "What if we could help, without them knowing it was us? What if we could free your people without starting a war?" For the first time, hope flickered in Nari's expression. Communications officer Han Ji-woo stared at the alien device Nari had pulled from a hidden pocket in her clothing. It looked like a smooth stone, but when Nari touched it in a specific pattern, it glowed with soft blue light. "She says it's how her people stay in contact," Da'un translated, having become Nari's unofficial interpreter over the past few days. "But she's scared to use it, says the bad people might track it." Ji-woo had been working with communication systems for 15 years, but he had never seen technology like this. "Can you ask her how it works?" Through careful questions and Nari's drawings, Ji-woo learned that the device used quantum entanglement to send messages instantly across vast distances. It was far more advanced than anything humans had developed, yet the Lumari treated it like a simple tool. "If I can figure out how to mask the signal," Ji-woo said, studying the device, "we might be able to contact her people without anyone tracking." Thus, it took him 3 days of careful work, but Ji-woo managed to route the alien communication through the Pioneer's own systems, hiding its origin. When Nari finally activated the device, her hands were shaking. The response came immediately. Voices speaking in the musical Lumari language, filled with excitement and disbelief. Nari began crying as she heard familiar voices, people she thought she might never speak to again. "They can't believe I'm alive," she told Da'un between sobs. "They thought the transport crash killed everyone." But the joy quickly turned to urgency. The voices on the other end were sharing information that made Nari's face grow pale. She drew frantically as she listened, creating a map that made Ji-woo's stomach turn. Dozens of facilities, scattered across 12 different star systems, all within Corvani territory, each one holding hundreds or thousands of Lumari prisoners. The scale was bigger than anyone had imagined. "They're organized," Da'un reported as Nari continued translating. "The Lumari have people in each facility trying to coordinate escapes, but they need help from the outside." The most shocking revelation came when Nari showed them market data the Resistance had somehow obtained. The Corvani Empire's entire economy was built on Lumari gem production. Every major trade deal, every diplomatic agreement, every military purchase was funded by enslaved labor. The jewelry in the Galactic Trade Center, Ji-woo realized with growing horror. The gems that power half the communication systems in known space. They're all made by prisoners. Captain Choi Min-seo arrived in the communications room just as Nari was receiving coordinates for 3 facilities closest to human space. The captain was a stern woman who had seen combat on 6 different worlds, but even she looked shaken by what she was hearing. "How many total?" she asked. Nari held up fingers, counting. When she reached the number, Captain Choi closed her eyes. Over 50,000 Lumari scattered across Corvani space. "Ma'am," Jiwoo said carefully, "if we report this to Earth Command, they'll want us to turn Nari over to the diplomatic corps. It could take years to negotiate any kind of response. And while we're negotiating, those people stay enslaved." Dayun added. Captain Choi stared at the star map Nari had drawn, marking each facility location. "If we act without authorization, we could start an interstellar war. The Corvani Empire has 3 times as many ships as Earth." But Nari was drawing again, showing them something new. Guard rotations, transport schedules, facility layouts, the pie. Resistance had detailed intelligence on their captors, information that could make rescue missions possible. "They're not asking us to fight their war for them," Dayun realized. "They just need someone to help coordinate the escapes." Jiwoo pulled up his tactical display, overlaying Nari's information with known Corvani patrol routes. "If we could create distractions at key points, maybe fake some mining accidents to draw security away, we'd be committing an act of war against a superior force," Captain Choi said quietly. Nari looked up at the 3 humans, understanding enough to know they were debating whether to help her people. She didn't speak, but her golden eyes held a simple question. What would you want someone to do if it was your family trapped in those facilities? Captain Choi made her decision. Security Chief Yoon Hyun Woo watched Captain Choi pace the bridge, knowing she was about to make a decision that would change everything. The evidence was overwhelming. Video testimonies from Nari, detailed maps of the facilities, even samples of the gems with their unique mineral signatures that proved they weren't naturally mined. "If we do this, there's no going back," Hyun Woo warned. "The Corvani won't just file a diplomatic complaint. They'll come for us with everything they have." Captain Choi stopped pacing and looked at the main screen, where Nari's drawings of the prison facilities were displayed. Thousands of faces, all looking hopeful that someone, somewhere, might help them. "Prep the transmission," she ordered Jiwoo. "Full broadcast to the Galactic Council. Every member species gets this information simultaneously." Hyun-woo immediately began running security protocols. He sealed the bridge, activated the ship's defensive systems, and sent coded messages to the rest of the human fleet. If the Corvani decided to silence them permanently, the Pioneer would need all the help it could get. The broadcast went live at 1400 hours, ship time. Jiwoo had compiled everything into a devastating presentation. Nari's testimony, translated into 17 different languages. Video evidence of the gem production process, financial records showing how Corvani wealth was built on slavery, the locations of every known facility. The response was immediate and explosive. On Altair Prime, the stock exchange shut down within minutes as gem prices collapsed. Traders who had invested fortunes in Corvani jewelry watched their portfolios disappear in real time. The Zephyrian Trade Federation immediately banned all Corvani gem imports, causing chaos in luxury markets across 12 star systems. The Andromedan Coalition is demanding an emergency session of the Galactic Council, Jiwoo reported, monitoring the flood of incoming communications. The Centauri Republic just recalled their ambassador from Corvani space, but not everyone was supportive. Several species that depended heavily on Corvani trade were calling the broadcast human propaganda and demanding proof beyond testimony. Some even suggested that humans had fabricated the evidence to damage Corvani economic power. "The Corvani are responding," Hyun-woo said, his voice tense. "Official statement calls our broadcast malicious lies designed to destabilize interstellar commerce." The Corvani response was smooth and professional. They invited inspection teams to visit their legitimate mining operations. They offered to provide geological surveys and mining records. They even expressed deep concern about the treatment of any prisoners of war and promised full cooperation with humanitarian organizations. But Nari had warned them this would happen. The Corvani had spent decades building their cover story. They had fake mining sites, complete with excavation equipment and manufactured geological data. Any inspection team would see exactly what the Corvani wanted them to see. The real bombshell came 6 hours after the broadcast. Dajun was monitoring civilian communication channels when she picked up something unexpected. "Captain," she called out excitedly, "we're getting responses from other Lumari, not just the ones in the facilities. There are free Lumari scattered across the galaxy, hiding among other species. They're confirming everything Nari told us." One by one, Lumari who had escaped years ago began coming forward. A merchant on Kepler Station, a maintenance worker in the outer colonies, a refugee family living under false identities on New Geneva. All of them shared the same story of capture, enslavement, and desperate escape. The Corvani couldn't dismiss dozens of independent witnesses as easily as they had dismissed one human broadcast. "Corvani fleet movements detected," Hyunwoo reported, studying his tactical display. "3 battle groups are moving toward the border. They're not heading directly for us, but they're positioning themselves for something." Captain Choi nodded. Grimly, "They're going to try to silence the facilities before anyone can inspect them, eliminate the evidence." The thought of thousands of Lumari being murdered to protect Corvani's secrets made everyone on the bridge feel sick. But there was hope, too. The broadcast had worked. The galaxy was finally paying attention to what the Corvani Empire had been hiding. "Ma'am," Jiwoo said quietly, "we're receiving a priority message from Earth Command." Captain Choi took a deep breath. Their own government was about to weigh in on what they had started. Diplomat Song A-ri had been pulled from her vacation on Mars and rushed to the Pioneer within 18 hours of the broadcast. She arrived looking tired, but determined, carrying authorization codes that made Captain Choi breathe a sigh of relief. Earth Command was backing their play. "The good news is that half the galaxy is furious with the Corvani," A-ri reported during her first briefing. "The bad news is the other half thinks we're lying to start a war." She had been working the communication channels non-stop during her journey to the Pioneer, reaching out to every diplomatic contact she had built over 15 years of service. The responses were mixed, but some were very promising. "The Zephyrians are ready to act," she continued. "They've been suspicious of Corvani mining claims for years. Their geologists always said the numbers didn't add up. The Zephyrians were perfect allies for this fight. Their species had a deep cultural hatred of slavery, stemming from their own history of oppression centuries ago. More importantly, they had one of the most advanced fleets in the galaxy." "What about the Alterians?" Captain Choi asked. A-ri smiled for the first time since arriving. "They're not just joining us, they're leading the charge. Turns out their crown princess has been wearing Corvani gems for state functions. She's absolutely horrified and wants to make it right." While A-ri worked on building their coalition, engineer Jae-min was having his own breakthrough with Nari. The Lumari girl had mentioned that she had stolen data during her escape, but it had taken days to figure out how to access the information. Stored in her communication device. "It's not just facility locations," Jae-min reported excitedly. "She's got shipping schedules, supply routes, even financial records. The Corvani kept detailed logs of everything." Nari had been incredibly brave during her escape. While the transport ship was crashing, instead of just running for safety, she had accessed the ship's computer and downloaded as much information as she could carry. The data was a treasure trove of intelligence. "Look at this," Jae-min said, projecting a holographic star map. "There are facilities we didn't know about. Hidden installations in asteroid fields, mobile processing ships, even underground complexes on supposedly empty worlds." The scope was staggering. The Corvani hadn't just enslaved the Lumari they could find. They had been actively hunting them across the galaxy, capturing them from other planets where small populations had settled. "This one here," Nari said, pointing to a red dot on the edge of Corvani space. "Family. My family." Jae-min felt his heart sink. Nari's parents and siblings were being held at a facility called Processing Station 7. According to the data, it housed over 2,000 Lumari and was heavily guarded. Meanwhile, Irie's diplomatic efforts were paying off. The Alterian fleet had already begun moving toward the border, officially calling it training exercises, but clearly preparing for action. The Zephyrians were being more subtle, but their intelligence services were sharing information about Corvani military positions. "We've got 12 species committed to sanctions," Ari reported. 6 are willing to provide material support. 3 are ready to join military action if needed. But the Corvani weren't sitting idle either. Their diplomats were working just as hard, calling in favors and making new deals. Several species that depended on Corvani trade were pressuring the Galactic Council to dismiss the unsubstantiated human claims. "They're offering massive discounts on gem purchases," Ari said with disgust. "Trying to buy silence with blood money." The breakthrough came when Jamin and Nari managed to crack the Corvani financial records. The data showed payments to dozens of planetary governments, bribes disguised as trade agreements, and corruption reaching into the highest levels of galactic politics. "We don't just have evidence of slavery," Jamin announced. "We have proof of widespread corruption. Half the Galactic Council has been taking Corvani money." This changed everything. Species that had been neutral suddenly found themselves facing evidence that their own leaders had been compromised. The political landscape shifted overnight. "The Andromedans are calling for a complete investigation," Ari reported. "They want forensic auditors going through every Corvani financial transaction for the past 50 years. Nari looked up from the data she was helping to translate. "Time is short," she said in her careful English. "Corvani will destroy evidence. Kill witnesses, we must move fast." She was right. With each passing hour, the risk grew that the Corvani would simply eliminate the facilities and claim the Lumari had been moved to safer locations. The alliance was forming, but would it be fast enough? Marine Captain Kwak Soo-jin had led raids on pirate bases and hostile planets, but nothing had prepared her for what she saw on the tactical display. Processing Station 12 floated in the darkness of space, looking like a standard mining facility. From the outside, inside, according to Nari's stolen data, were over 3,000 enslaved Lumari. "Remember, these people have been prisoners for years," Soo-jin told her assault team over the comm. "They're going to be scared, confused, and weak. We move fast but gentle." The coalition fleet had positioned itself just outside Corvani sensor range. 3 human destroyers, 2 Zephyrian cruisers, and an Altarian support ship. It wasn't the largest force ever assembled, but it would have to be enough. Nari sat in the command center of Soo-jin's ship, wearing a borrowed human uniform that was too big for her small frame. She had insisted on coming along, despite everyone's protests. Her knowledge of Corvani facility layouts could mean the difference. "Between success and disaster. Security checkpoint here," Nari said, pointing to the holographic blueprint. "Guards change shift every 6 hours. We have 20 minutes before next rotation." Soo-jin nodded. The timing had to be perfect. "Get in, disable the security systems, free the prisoners, and get out before Corvani reinforcements arrived." Simple in theory, terrifying in practice. The approach went smoothly. Soo-jin's Marines used stealth pods to reach the facility's docking bay while the main ships created a distraction on the other side of the station. The Corvani guards were focused on the merchant vessels, requesting emergency repairs, completely missing the real threat. "Charges placed on the main security door," reported Sergeant Kim Min-ho over the radio. "Ready to breach on your command." Soo-jin took a deep breath. Once they blew that door, there would be no hiding what they were doing. The Corvani would know they were under attack, and the clock would start ticking. All teams, execute. The door exploded inward with a flash of light and smoke. Soo-jin's Marines poured through the breach, moving with practiced precision. The Corvani guards were caught completely off guard, surrendering almost immediately when faced with superior numbers and firepower. But it was what they found inside that stopped everyone cold. Rows upon rows of small cells, each barely large, enough for a person to lie down. The Lumari prisoners looked up with wide, frightened eyes as armored humans appeared in their doorways. Many were so thin their ribs showed through their skin. Others had gems embedded in their palms from years of forced production. "It's okay," Soo-jin said, removing her helmet so they could see her face. "We're here to help. Nari sent us." At the mention of Nari's name, the prisoners began to stir. Word spread quickly through the facility in the musical Lumari language. The escaped girl was alive. Help had come. Nari's voice came over the comm system, speaking to her people in their own language. Sujin couldn't understand the words, but she could hear the emotion. Nari was telling them they were safe, that humans and their allies had come to free them. The evacuation was chaos, but organized chaos. The Zephyrian medical teams worked frantically to stabilize the weakest prisoners, while human engineers dismantled the gem processing equipment. Every piece of evidence would be needed for the trials that would follow. "Ma'am, we've got a problem," Minho reported from the command center. "Corvani battle fleet detected, heading our way. 12 ships, including 2 heavy cruisers." Sujin felt her stomach drop. The intelligence had said the nearest Corvani military base was 4 hours away. Either the intelligence was wrong, or the Corvani had been expecting this. "How long until they reach us?" 47 minutes. Sujin looked around at the hundreds of Lumari still being evacuated. Many were too weak to walk and had to be carried. There was no way they could get everyone out in 47 minutes. "Coalition Command, this is Strike Team Alpha," she called. "Over the long-range comm. We need immediate support. Corvani Response Force inbound." The response came from Admiral Park Dong-hyun himself, commanding the main human fleet. "Understood, Alpha. Additional ships en route, but they won't reach you in time. You need to hold that position. Hold position against 12 Corvani warships, with 3,000 weak prisoners to protect." Sujin had faced impossible odds before, but this was different. These weren't soldiers under her command. They were innocent people who had suffered enough. "Nari," she called over the comm. "Are there any defensive systems on this station we can use?" There was a pause, then Nari's excited voice. "Yes, mining lasers. Very powerful. Corvani used them to break asteroids. Mining lasers weren't weapons, but in the right hands, they could become weapons." Sujin smiled grimly. It looked like they were going to turn a prison into a fortress. The Corvani were coming, but they were going to find out what happened when you picked a fight with humans protecting innocent people. Admiral Park Dong-hyun stood in the command center of the flagship Seoul, watching dozens of tactical displays showing Corvani space. The rescue at Processing Station 12 had been just the beginning. Now, 3,000 freed Lumari were sharing intelligence that was reshaping everything they thought they knew about their enemy. "The Corvani aren't as strong as they pretend to be," reported Intelligence Officer Lieutenant Baek Soo-min, analyzing data from the rescued prisoners. "Half their fleet is made up of converted cargo ships. They've been bluffing about their military strength for decades." The freed Lumari had provided detailed information about guard rotations, supply schedules, and most importantly, the locations of hidden facilities that weren't on any official records. The Corvani had been so confident in their secrecy that they had never bothered to change their security protocols. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from Nari," Communications Officer Park Ji-sung announced. "She's ready to make the broadcast." "Admiral." Park nodded. This was the moment they had been planning for 3 days. Nari, now safely aboard the Seoul, was about to address every Lumari in Corvani space, simultaneously using their quantum communication network. The transmission began with Nari's voice, speaking in the musical Lumari language, but with subtitles, appearing on screens across the fleet. She looked directly into the camera, her golden eyes blazing with determination. "My people, I am Nari of the Crystal Caves clan. I speak to you from a human ship, surrounded by friends who have sworn to help us reclaim our freedom." The response was immediate. Communication channels lit up with replies from Lumari across the Empire. Prisoners who had been silent for years suddenly found their voices. Workers in the facilities began sharing information about their guards and their schedules. "The humans have shown us something we had forgotten," Nari continued. "That we are not property. We are not tools, we are people, and people deserve to be free." Meanwhile, Admiral Park was coordinating the largest simultaneous military operation in human history. 12 strike teams were positioned near different facilities, waiting for the signal to attack. Each team included human marines, Zephyrian, specialists and Alterian support ships. "All teams report ready," confirmed Operations Officer Commander Lee Yon-soo. "Targets locked, insertion teams standing by." But the real revolution was happening inside the facilities themselves. The freed Lumari had shared something the humans hadn't expected: the locations of weapons caches hidden throughout the prison complexes. The Corvani were paranoid about rebellion, explained Taemin, one of the rescued prisoners. They kept emergency weapons in case of riots, but they never changed the access codes. Across Corvani space, Lumari prisoners were accessing these hidden armories and turning the weapons on their guards. What had started as coordinated rescue missions was becoming a full-scale uprising. Strike Team 7 reports successful breach. At Processing Station 5, Jisung announced, 2,000 prisoners freed, minimal casualties. Strike Team 3 has secured the mining platform at Kepler 7. The Lumari there had already overpowered the guards. One by one, the reports came in. Facilities falling to coordinated attacks or internal rebellions. Corvani security forces, trained to intimidate starving prisoners, found themselves facing organized resistance for the first time. The economic impact was immediate and devastating. The Galactic Gem Exchange suspended all trading as reports of facility liberations flooded in. Companies that had built their entire business models around Corvani gems watched their stock prices collapse. The Corvani are trying to maintain control of their core systems, reported Intelligence Officer Bayek, but they're losing contact with their outer facilities. Their communication network is breaking down. The Corvani had built their empire on secrecy and fear. Now, with their secrets exposed and their prisoners fighting back, the entire system was crumbling. Ships that had been transporting gems were being captured or abandoned. Trade routes that had operated for decades were suddenly empty. "Sir, we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth," Jisung announced. "The President wants to speak with you directly." Admiral Park took the call on his private channel. The conversation was brief but intense. Earth Command was authorizing full military support for the liberation effort. The gloves were coming off. "All ships, this is Admiral Park," he announced to the fleet. "We are no longer conducting rescue operations. We are conducting a war of liberation. The Corvani Empire ends today." The response from his crews was immediate and enthusiastic. These weren't just soldiers following orders anymore. They were people who had seen the horrors of the Corvani facilities and decided that some things were worth fighting for. Nari's final words in her broadcast echoed through the fleet. "Freedom is not given. It is taken. Today, we take ours." The surrender came 3 weeks after the liberation began, delivered by a broken Corvani admiral whose empire had crumbled around him. Admiral Park Dong-hyun received the transmission aboard the Seoul, with Nari standing beside him as an official representative of her people. "The Corvani Empire formally requests cessation of hostilities," the alien admiral said, his voice hollow with defeat. "We acknowledge the independence of all Lumari territories and agree to full reparations as determined by the Galactic Council." 90% of the facilities had fallen, some to human-led strikes, others to internal uprisings, and many simply abandoned as Corvani guards fled rather than face the growing rebellion. Over 47,000 Lumari had been freed, more than anyone had dared hope existed. Lieutenant Kim Tae-ho, who had started this whole journey by discovering gems in a waste disposal unit, now found himself standing in the main conference room of Earth's newest embassy. The building was still under construction on the world the Lumari had chosen as their capital, but it already felt like home. "I never imagined this," he said to Nari, who was wearing formal diplomatic robes instead of the borrowed human uniform he remembered. 3 months ago you were a prisoner. Now you're an ambassador." Nari smiled, her fox ears twitching with amusement. 3 months ago, you thought I was just making pretty stones. Now you're the human liaison to an entire species." The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Tae-ho had been promoted to diplomatic attaché, despite having no formal training in diplomacy. But Earth Command had realized that sometimes the best diplomats were the ones who understood that other species were just people, not political puzzles to solve. The Lumari Free Territory was taking shape quickly. 12 worlds had been designated as their sovereign space, rich in the minerals their people needed but previously considered worthless by other species. The Galactic Council had fast-tracked their membership application, eager to make amends for decades of willful blindness to their suffering. "The medical teams say the psychological recovery is going better than expected," Tae-ho reported, reading from his tablet. Dr. Park So-young thinks it's because your people have strong family bonds. Finding their relatives alive has helped with the healing process. So-young had stayed on as the chief medical liaison, overseeing the rehabilitation of thousands of former prisoners. The physical recovery was relatively straightforward, but helping people overcome years of trauma was more complex. Engineer O. Jae-min had found his calling as well, working with Lumari technicians to reverse engineer their quantum communication technology. The breakthrough had already revolutionized interstellar communications, and the Lumari were sharing it freely with their allies. The first gem processing facility should be online next month, Nari said, pointing to construction. Plans displayed on the wall. Voluntary work only, with full benefits and profit sharing for all workers. It had been Nari's idea to continue gem production, but under completely different circumstances. Instead of forced labor, the Lumari would work normal shifts with regular breaks, producing gems that would fund their new society. The irony was perfect. The same biological process that had been used to enslave them would now finance their freedom. The economic impact was still rippling through the galaxy. Former Corvani worlds were struggling to rebuild their economies without slave labor. Some had asked to join the growing coalition of species supporting Lumari independence, hoping to rebuild their reputations. The Zephyrians want to establish a joint military academy, Taeho mentioned, and the Altarians are proposing a cultural exchange program. Humanity had gained more than allies in this conflict. They had gained respect. Species across the galaxy now saw humans as protectors of the innocent, willing to risk war to defend those who couldn't defend themselves. "There's something I want to show you," Nari said, leading Taeho to the embassy's observation deck. Outside, Lumari families were gathered in the central plaza, their children playing games that had been forbidden in the facilities. The sound of laughter echoed off the new buildings, a sound that had been absent from Lumari lives for too long. "They call this place Hope's Landing," Nari explained, "named after the first human ship that came to help us." Taeho watched a group of young Lumari racing around a fountain, their parents watching with joy that still seemed surprised, as if they couldn't quite believe their children were truly free. "You know what the strangest part is?" he said. "None of this would have happened if you hadn't been embarrassed about pooping gems." Nari laughed, the sound bright and musical. "Maybe that's the real lesson. Sometimes the things we're most ashamed of become the keys to our freedom."